are going to get started, so if everybody would take their seats. They have not wanted us to do introductions, but by way of stage setting, Heather Hiles, the new president of the California Community College Online College, is here with me. And to set a larger stage for the conversation, one of the reasons in the press that the institution was set up was because there are apparently 2.5 million people here in California between the ages of 25 and 34 who either have achieved a high school diploma or less. And nearly 80% or more are working, and half are Latino or Latinx. And so Governor Brown signed legislation to launch the California Online Community College last year, and it's now the 115th community college in California, and it's set up as one of 73 districts. So Heather, take a big picture on this and tell us, what problems is this going to solve, and why does it matter to the state and to the people?
Sure. Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and it's an honor to be with you, by the way, Martha. So first of all, the California Online Community College and District is not the official name, but we are close to actually getting a name vetted that belongs to Californians and feels right for them. So soon to come, we'll have a real name. But the reason, going to your question, Martha, the reason that this is so important is there are actually between 8 and 10 million Californians who are underemployed or unemployed, and who are struggling just to survive, let alone thrive. So these are mostly folks who are working part-time jobs, have no real benefits besides the governmental supports provided, and have, in many cases, are caring for families, their parents and their children, and are really struggling and are really demoralized and can't seem to get ahead. And most of them are actually feeling like they're getting further and further behind. And oftentimes, these folks also fall prey to for-profit institutions that are happy to take their student loan money, but oftentimes aren't happy to make sure that they complete what needs to happen. And even when sometimes people complete these programs, it doesn't guarantee that they're going to have a living wage job in the industry in which they've been trained. And so we have a lot of work to do to deliver on the ability for people to have meaningful work that allows for them to thrive and support their families.
So given that your past history has been really working with people on the margins, people who need the support, the folks you've been talking about, and you've been an entrepreneur and you've been a social justice leader in your career, tell us, sort of looking back on your career, what lessons would you apply to this challenge? Because this is brand new. California's never had this kind of a thing before.
So it is true that for the past 30 years, I've been helping people realize either their academic goals or their professional goals. And it started, I worked my way through UC Berkeley by working with a former Black Panther who taught me that not everybody started at the same place and received the same education in K-12. And what we did is we actually had UC students from Cal tutoring kindergarten through third graders who are already doing poorly on standardized tests, already behind. And I worked with those kids and their teachers and their families, their parents, to make sure that they would be successful. And we'd give them a snack after school and help them do better on tests and tutor them at a ratio of 4 to 1. And it really worked. And so I just learned, not everybody gets the same experience and has the same needs, but everybody has, I do believe that intelligence and aptitude is equally distributed across all socioeconomic strata. And so after I graduated Cal, one of my first jobs was working with high school students at a Castlemont High who all had to have their own jobs in order to stay in high school. So Eddie, who was African American, his mother was in prison for shooting her husband, and his brother was slinging rocks, selling drugs, and was out of school. And he's like, if I don't have this job, I got to do the same thing. And Tequila was living with her grandmother, but her uncle stole her backpack every day, and she had to support herself. And I could go on, but those young people, I was not that much older than them. I was 22, and they were, 16, 17, 18. But I realized how fortunate I had been that I lived with a mother who was able to provide for me every day. And so that's something that I realized these are people with adult-type responsibilities, regardless of their age, and that they needed skills, and they needed jobs, and they needed to be able to support themselves and their families. And then in the 90s, I built out welfare-to-work training programs. And it was the time where people were put on lifetime limits for how long they could receive benefits. Right. And they were told, just learn how to wake up on time and work at McDonald's and have soft skills. And I realized that's not going to help people be able to thrive long term, and that's actually not a viable solution. So I built a business case for the business community to say, if you invest in hard skills training, you invest in people, they will learn your jobs, and they will be the most loyal and consistent and reliable employees you can have. And sure enough, we work with employers and with actual jobs. I would take a job like a unit coordinator at a hospital. I would look at the hard functional soft skills required for the job, reverse engineer what a woman who typically on average had a 7th grade reading, 4th grade math, and I would say, what exactly, precisely does she need to be an exemplary employee? And then I would put together instruction at the downtown campus of the Community College of San Francisco, business English or business math. Then online e-learning solutions with a company called Digital Think. They gave us free licenses so we could train people and they could have flexible time to really study the hard skills content. And then paid work experience at the job site where they were on the job applying what they learned as a proof operator at Bank of America or a unit coordinator at CPMC Hospital. And then once they were actually hired into the jobs, and we had a 95% placement and hiring rate from the training programs, we would provide 9 months of retention services. So people who were coaches, making sure people knew how to perform and comport themselves on the job and help guide and coach them. We were then able to provide things like individual development accounts and financial literacy training so people could save money and acquire assets. But what I learned is, and so what happened with that is employers ended up hiring these folks. They came to job, day one of the job, they were prepared, knew exactly what to do. People from their own company had actually mentored on a one-to-one basis those employees. So they had a lot of investment in those people being successful. And what happened was the morale boosted of the existing employees. And then finally, I learned that even though it's amazing and wonderful to get someone from welfare into a living wage job, that's actually not enough because, you know what, living the paycheck to paycheck and getting your 3 kids to school and just making it all happen on time is really hard. And it's really hard. And so by helping people save for assets and thinking about their future and teaching them the power of how you save money and how you and the magic of compound interest and how you invest it and how you acquire assets like home ownership or starting a business or more education, really help people feel optimistic about the future and change the behaviors of the people that we work with. So I've learned all that, and I believe that employer job-specific training is critical to the training that we do at this district. People need to know and not guess and hope and be sold a bill of goods that they might, with this right training or this right credential, be ready and get employed. No, we have to know from day one, people are actually going to be in those jobs when they complete these competencies. And the one other thing I'll say is that we are empowering people to be employable in an ongoing, ever-changing economy. And so we're helping people have the confidence and the ability to learn new skills on an ongoing basis for lifelong growth.
So the whole industry, many of the people at the conference here are doing those kinds of things,
yes.
Doing short-term training, trying to link what they're doing to resources in the community, working with community colleges And then on the other side, the community colleges are offering a lot of what you talked about, as well as the executive education program and university systems. So how are you going to differentiate what this will do that will be leading edge or cutting edge?
One of the big differences is that we have employers who are going to pay people to learn their jobs. So by working with employers, understanding exactly the competencies required for someone to do the job, and having the employers pay for the hard, at least the hard skills instruction, not necessarily all the wraparound, but definitely the skills that are required for their jobs is a big differentiator. What that means is that we don't have to pass on exorbitant costs to our learners, to our adult learners.
So what will be the benefits for the employers? What are they going to get? What are they going to get that
they get qualified people. So most of big companies pay millions of dollars a year to consultants just to say, go recruit people at this university, or you might find some labor here. And they could redirect all those dollars into just training Californians right here where their jobs are for those jobs.
So it'll be, will you?
And what they'll get is they'll get people who are job ready day one because they have the skills, and they're loyal to the companies because the companies invested in them and know them. And they'll get people who stay and excel within their businesses. And Accenture just did an ROI study for Discover, the financial services company. And they found that the return on investment in retaining employees, where Discover paid people to get their 4-year credentials and advance educationally, they had tremendous employee loyalty, and they retained those folks, and those people advance within Discover.
So looking back, how is this going to be different than what employers did, which we used to call on-the-job training? Okay,
on-the-job training is a very important part of what we're talking about. Some people will call it blended learning, applied learning. Sometimes they're apprenticeships, sometimes they're not. But you can call it whatever you want, but it's when people are demonstrating what they know and learning, as we all do on the job every day, but they're getting paid for it, and they're getting to succeed and learn how to succeed in that particular work environment. So you can call it paid work experience, and I'm perfectly comfortable with that. You can call it on-the-job training. You can call it, some of these will be apprenticeships. It'll be all that.
So I'm trying to understand, so how many, let's just say you have a few thousand students to get started with.
Yeah.
And they will be paid to be in their education, and they will have an entry-level internship or job when they start.
Yes.
So what will be the value add of the online environment? What will that look like?
Okay, so as I articulated, a similar kind of model with what we did at SF Works. The roles of technology, have come a long way since the late 1990s. And so there's a lot that technology does for us by accessing metadata, frankly, and then delivering exactly the right content and assessment and information to a person exactly when they need it. So what I mean by that is theoretically we could build a competency engine so that every single job type that is articulated by a company gives us the 10 competencies for that job. And then when I do assessments, you'll know I start with 5 of those competencies, but I need to learn the other 5, and will serve me exactly the content that I need to study in order to complete the other 5 assessments of the other 5 competencies. Also, software helps us track people. Chatbots can, and also inquiries made either in real time or in an asynchronous way where people need guiding or they have a pressing question that they're stuck on, being able to provide those kinds of advisory supports real time, but also a lot of it can be anticipated and delivered for people and customized for their actual needs at the right time. There are so many different ways in which technology help us deliver and instruct people with what they need when they need it. And I think it all should go to optimizing human interaction so that the time I spend with you, my coach, or with you and a a live instructor, or with my manager, is optimized because I have the other supports and the other information I need when I need it through my phone and through other places.
So I'm going to go a little bit to the future now.
Sure.
Mark Baldassare is the president. He's been the longtime president and CEO of the Public Policy Institute of California.
Okay.
And he recently said that in a state, California, known for innovation and world-class higher education, the community college system is ideally suited to pioneer and rigorously evaluate this concept of online education. Heather, pretend we're sitting here in 2030.
Okay.
And you're telling the audience about the accomplishments of what I read about. It'll be a new research and development center associated with
Yes.
the online college.
Yes.
So you'll be building that. So tell us about what the vision is.
Okay. Well, so there are a couple things there. You know, if we're sitting here in 2030, I want to tell you about, you know, the millions of people who have been able to get placed into living wage jobs and excel and grow within those career paths. And I'll be able to tell you about the technologies and the interventions and the supports that were critical to different types of people getting past whatever barriers they had into those jobs, and also the fact that they've built professional networks, because many of the folks who are in these low-skilled, low-demand jobs, or are stuck in, and sometimes called stranded workers, are there because they don't have the professional networks even to get interviews for the right jobs. So I'll be also telling you about the state of connectedness to content as well as to employers that our students are enjoying. But from an R&D perspective, what I think is really interesting is the 8 to 10 million people who are underemployed and unemployed in California are not a monolithic group. We're an extremely diverse state, as you know. Even when I served at Castlemont High School, these 65 high school kids, a third of them were Latinx, a third were African American, and a third were of Asian ancestry. And they had different stories and challenges. They had some shared struggles, all being poor, but they had some very culturally specific challenges. And when you look at people of different age ranges, and whether they've immigrated recently or have been here for numerous generations like my family, then you see that their challenges and their barriers look different and they feel different. So what I should be able to tell you, you know, even a decade from now, and even hopefully 5 years from now, is if you segment the 8 million folks into psychographic, more detailed, more specific kinds of profiles, I should be able to tell you what kinds of needs are felt by different populations. What a single man who comes in and out of juvenile hall and the criminal justice system for years feels and needs in terms of supports to be relocated and based in his community and thrive looks different from a single mom who's been working since she maybe dropped out of high school, has 2 or 3 dependents, but pays her rent every month and is not in the criminal justice system, but has these challenges and is taking care of her parents as well as her kids. Looks very different. And you know, what a 50-year-old woman who speaks primarily Cantonese and has been working in a sweatshop in Chinatown, what she needs looks very different as well. So I should be able to tell you what works for whom.
So do you think you'll have deliverables from the research that many of the folks are engaged in out in the audience, you know, from artificial intelligence, the learning sciences, game theory? Stanford has a whole center for advanced research and in online learning. How do you see all of those new directions for companies impacting what you might do in the online environment?
Right. Well, one of the exciting things is that we have the capital and have the runway to experiment and try new technologies and innovations. One of the things that was hardest for me as an entrepreneur trying to break into the higher ed market was that I felt like it was dominated by big publishers and big companies who squashed innovation because they didn't want the competition. So they either suck you up or kill you with marketing budget, and you just can't get your foot in the door to get enough scale to try and test new technologies and interventions. And I think it's really depressed the innovation in the educational sector. So we get to try new stuff, and we're not afraid of it. In fact, my very diverse team is very intellectually honest and interested in trying new technologies to see what works. I'll give you one example to start. One of the things that was a problem we really couldn't solve back in the late 1990s was, how do I, if you've never held jobs in corporate America, how do I let you know what a day in the life of, before we invest in training you, looks like for somebody who works at Bank of America versus somebody who's on the front line in a hospital versus somebody who's doing call center work. Until you're in there and you're trying it out, how do you know what that feels like? What it feels like, you know, to be on the job for a while, and the growth, the trajectory of possibilities in the future. So I think, for example, VR, I love VR technology. I think you could really have some experiences that would give you some day in the life of information without, so you could make some well-informed decisions about, oh, I really like the healthcare path, and here's some things, maybe I don't want to do ultrasounds, but I'd like to do that. So you might be able to get some real-world experiences and some kind of information about what this is really like before you commit to a training path. So that's one type of technology and one little scenario. But in the value chain of all the things our people need in order to succeed and thrive and unlock their intellectual curiosity and their confidence and their pathway to success, there's a lot of different stuff we need to test.
Yeah, I think it's a huge challenge to figure out, you know, which technologies, which platforms,
correct,
and which partnerships are going to be really helpful to drive not only this college, but to really be a benefit for the whole system.
That's right.
Because,
that's right.
And why don't you talk a little bit about how you see this fitting into the system as a whole within
Sure.
California, because you've got 115 community colleges all locally dispersed everywhere. You've got the university system, you've got K-12.
Yep. Well, let me start with the community college district, because that's the one that we are of and most explicitly focused on partnering with and working with. So we think there's tremendous, amazing, fantastic infrastructure in the other 114 community colleges, and we're not looking to replicate that at all. They serve incredibly well the students who are able to be, especially those who are able to be full-time at the community colleges, and they are place-based. They are a great set of facilities and infrastructure for lots of place-based services. The cohort, the interaction with students and instructors and employers and the community. So what we want to do is we want to focus with, like I said, our metric of most meaning is employability, people having jobs so that they can support themselves, which is different from being driven or primarily focused on credentials, certificates, and articulation or transfer into four-year institutions. Where we are serving people in a certificate credentialized pathway, we absolutely will be working with our community college partners to support them to deliver their curricula to our students and to provide certification, and we are readying ourselves for accreditation in all those areas. Healthcare is an incredibly certified and credentialized pathway, for example. And so we have been looking at many different campuses and working with, we have about 6 faculty from different campuses that we're working on right now and looking at our medical coding curricula as well as our cybersecurity curricula, and making sure that it meets all the needs for certification and credentials wherever possible. But what I see is that there are wonderful community colleges that already have really strong partnerships with employers, really fantastic curricula, and when and wherever those exist, we want to partner with our community college brethren and help them deliver that, but offer more wraparound, do more in the way of recruitment, do more in the way of bringing more employers to understand the resources that are at their regional community colleges. And then in the cases where employers have jobs where there are no curricula out there for their jobs unless it resides within the company, we're going to be working with the employers to build out the curricula and provide our wraparound services around that.
So that'd be more like customized training developed.
Yes.
When we looked at the authorizing legislation for the California Online College, it says it's going to offer working adults additional access to affordable, quality higher education opportunities with labor market value, as what you're saying.
Yes.
Including industry-valued credentials based on competencies leading to employment, earnings, gains, or upward mobility in the workplace, and not just courses leading to degrees and certificates. So we're wondering, how are you thinking about valuing short-term credentials in that context?
Yep.
And what are your biggest worries in this space with so much evidence, as you said, at the beginning, documenting value poor short-term credentials, especially those high-cost ones, like, when I worry about truck driving schools, and I look at automation, and I see, people have paid a lot of money to go to truck driving schools, and then what's going to happen when those jobs disappear in displacement?
I have to tell you, it is the thing that most offends me in life right now is the predatory behavior of so many of the vocational and for-profit institutions that are trying to gain people's financial aid, and don't really worry about the return on the investment for the learner, don't really worry about a lifetime of debt that they can never get out from under. It really, I feel like it's unconscionable, and I have no qualms about advertising and going after the people that they're preying upon and letting them know that there are free options for instruction and opportunity that really are tied to real jobs, rather than this kind of smoke and mirrors thing that people where a lot of people are taking advantage of. One of my dear family members is learning disabled, and he is forever being hoodwinked and preyed upon by different programs that just want his tuition, his financial aid money, and they tell him things that just aren't true. He just can't do certain jobs, and they tell him he can. We've got to stop that behavior. We've got to show that there's an alternative that is on an honest broker and connects you with real opportunities that you actually have aptitude for. And so that's what we're in the business of doing.
So you're going to have to build credibility.
But to your question about certification, so an example is one of the first two programs we're launching October 1 is a cybersecurity job. There are certain community colleges which have curricula that has been certified by the NSF and is really solid first entry-level kind of cybersecurity job. What we know is if you have an admin position and you learn the proper cybersecurity protocols, you can increase your salary by about $20,000 a year. It's an entry-level job, but it really can be the difference from being working poor and being able to support yourself. So that's a wonderful launch pad to building people's confidence and belief that they can become experts in cybersecurity. And there's 725,000 unfilled cybersecurity jobs at this moment in the country. And they're just continuing to grow with all the cybersecurity threats we have every day. So that's a wonderful example of an area and a pathway that's growing tremendously. And you really can, at a very low-tech position, get on that on-ramp.
So with all of this excitement, how are you thinking about competition? And I think I said this at the beginning, but we've got existing community colleges now competing for adult students. We've got for-profit, we've got nonprofit, we've got universities. And with the growing need of these students that you talked about, how will you build credibility, and how are you thinking about partnering versus competition,
Yep.
and what are the liabilities that you see ahead, and also the opportunities?
So I think the best way, actions always speak louder than words for me, and I think the best way we build credibility is we get people employed into real jobs. And we have employers who are actually investing in the workforce of today and tomorrow. I think that's number one. I think it speaks for itself. I think that helps people do some really easy comparative math against, do I want to get in $30 or $40 or $100,000 worth of debt at said institution, and maybe if I'm lucky I get the right job? Or do I want to get something that is directly tied to this job with this employer? I know what I'm doing, and at the end of it, I'm employed, and I'm in that state of connectedness. And I think that will start to show its own results, and I think we will be incredibly competitive with those players, which are my biggest competitors. I'd love to do all the predatory, I'd like to put all the predatory institutions out of business, frankly. I mean, that would be wonderful to us. And I think that our partners, our most important critical partners are other community college brethren and sisterin. And I think that they do amazing work. They have a shortage of resources oftentimes, and I think we have wonderful give and gets to help benefit all of our other community college partners. And I think in turn, they will help us really serve in the best way our adult learner students.
So how do you see the value add from the private sector? Not just the employers who are going to fund the students to come and customize the training with you and maybe link to the community colleges, but are there other value adds from the private sector that you've been thinking about?
Sure, there are lots of technologies and new technologies being invested in and developed every day. I was listening to someone from Workday at a conference last week talk about what I would call a learning graph. I don't know exactly what she calls it, but it's essentially all the metadata from all of her customers. She can tell you what are the different career development trajectories based on all the metadata of every job that they look at. And so they can help you kind of graph, what are my aptitudes and interests, and then what are different career paths that I could explore based on the data that she can organize. So there are lots of ways, if employers or if companies are interested, in which they can, like Digital Think did in the 1990s, give us free licenses to their software so that we can try their systems and figure out what helps our learners.
So looking ahead,
I thought we were looking at.
Well, there are a couple of groups here. So in terms of really building the kind of deep partnership that you'd like to see, what advice would you have for the community colleges that are here, the leaders here, and what advice would you have for the private sector leaders? Because this is a big challenge.
This is a big challenge, and I know we're talking about something that's kind of putting one of the models on its heads, which is expecting employers to invest in people learning their jobs. That's a new model, and I get that's a big deal.
Right, and the state's put a lot of money into this over a formidable period of years. So there's a significant investment, and there's been a significant investment in content.
Yes, absolutely. And so what I would say is, I would say that for the community college system on the whole, knowing and working with the curricula that is working for the employers and the learners, and working with us to get exposure and expand the access that our students have to that content is really one of the things that we're looking to do with our other community college partners. I would say that they have worlds of experience in their sectors and their domains that we would really like to leverage and benefit, and I would hope that the multiplier effect one of the impacts that they feel from partnering with us is the ability to get the word out and the message out and attract more learners into our programs. So that's what I would hope is the give and the get between us and other community colleges. With employers, what I would say is we have millions of people who have the raw talent and are hungry for your job opportunities. You don't have to go out of state and you don't have to go out of country to find these folks. So all you need to do is invest a little time in preparing them for your jobs. It's just that simple. It's just not that complicated. And you spend millions and millions doing lots of other stuff, exporting jobs and also, you know, doing these highfalutin kind of talent location expeditions, and reinvest that money in our people, and we will give you people who will be your best employees ever.
So I think I want to just summarize a little bit what we've heard. This is a brand new effort. There's going to be a lot of R&D, a lot of experimentation, and a lot of outreach, I think, on your part and the part of your new team to both the public and private sector. And I'm hearing that there's going to be a lot of focus on students who are displaced, who are out of the market, who haven't had the opportunities, who are going to need more rather than less resources and services and attention. Exactly. And I think that's one of the challenges I'm hearing for, you know, can the technology be leveraged to do more than folks are currently doing in the institutions or in the private sector, and how could this be something that, you know, would really make a difference for the population of people that just don't have those opportunities.
That's right.
So is there anything else you want to end, say to everyone before we end this session?
I think we've covered most of it. What I will say is I know it can be very confusing because these are the early days. I've been in the position as CEO for 8 weeks, and I'm just in the, that's why we don't have a name yet, and it's also confusing to call it an online community college, in that not that we aren't leveraging online content, but we're so much more than that, and we believe in the power of blended learning, and we know that for folks who weren't successful in traditional education, that purely online would never be the right offering. I know that from having looked at all the data for years. What I would say is, you know, give us a chance. I mean, that's what we need, is we need the chance. This is not going to work if we don't have real, meaningful engagement with employers, though. I mean, that's you know, we can talk around everything else. If we don't have real employers who really step up and make this investment in our people, this isn't going to come off properly. So we've got to get that done. That's first order business.
Well, why don't you all please thank me in thanking Heather. Thanking Heather for really a great talk this morning. I want to just thank you for being here.
Oh, my